Thank you very much, and thank you all for taking in this presentation on Northern Shield resources. This is probably one of the earlier stage stories you're going to hear today, but that's Northern Shield's wheelhouse. We understand early stage stories are not for everyone, but they also do provide a great opportunity for those that play in the space. I do have to bring your attention to this forward-looking statement advisory. So those of you who know us more as a nickel-copper PGE explorer. And over the years, but this presentation, I say, is going to focus on our new gold acquisitions in Eastern Canada. Over the years, Northern Shield implemented what we call a model-driven approach to our nickel-copper PGE exploration, which allowed us to very efficiently explore large tracts of land, or tracts of land that had very little background data. And we simply exported that approach to our gold exploration in the Maritimes. And that allowed us to take advantage of a very unique opportunity that came our way, and that unique opportunity is the Shot Rock property in Nova Scotia. So a little bit about Nova Scotia. Nova Scotia is actually much more known for its very fine lobster, but it actually has a little bit of a mining history. It's mined coal in the past, gypsum, and more recently some relatively small gold deposits called the Maguma Group in the southern portion of the province. But we very much like Nova Scotia as a jurisdiction for mining exploration, and this is one of the reasons why. But before coming here, I tallied up there are 1,200 known mineral occurrences, non-ferrous mineral occurrences, on the Government of Nova Scotia's database. I removed all of those that were already under license or in parks or other restricted areas, and this is what you're left with. You're left with 630 known mineral occurrences that are open for staking. I repeat, 630 mineral occurrences open for staking in the province of Nova Scotia. You go to the better known mining jurisdictions like Quebec, Ontario, BC, these mineral occurrences will be staked around the clock. So when you see 630 known mineral occurrences that haven't had any exploration since they were first found, most of them by the pioneers, nearly a century ago, you realize there's also opportunity for brand new raw discoveries like you'll see at Shot Rock. So the Shot Rock property is located in north-central Nova Scotia between the towns of New Glasgow and Antigonish along the Trans-Canada Highway. It's only an hour and a half drive from the capital at Halifax, where there's also an international airport. So Shot Rock was brought to our attention by a very industrious young prospector who was following up on historic, very gold anomalous stream sediment samples, mostly taken in the 70s and 80s, but for which no bedrock source had yet to be found. And I was actually down in Nova Scotia looking at a nickel cobalt project that he had, and he asked me if I was interested in gold in Nova Scotia. And I said, no, I'm not interested in gold in Nova Scotia, assuming it was Maguma Group, which tend to be small, though Atlantic Gold has now proven that wrong. But I wasn't interested in Maguma Group gold in Nova Scotia. So he started describing the rocks, and I realized what he was describing based on the chemistry and the mineralogy was nothing to do with Maguma Group at all. It sounded very much like what we call a low sulfidation epithermal gold system. But such a system had never been found in Nova Scotia at all. So this intrigued me even more, and I asked for some more information from the prospector, but he said, I can't give you any more information, because my idea is so big, I can't afford to stake it. I'm worried about you jumping claims on me, so I can't tell you anything more. So now we're at a little bit of an impasse. He wanted to option his claims, and I was now interested in optioning claims, but we were at an impasse. So I quickly said, well, here, the only thing we can do to move forward on this, take my credit card number, go and stake the claims in your names up to $5,000 worth, and once you're happy, come back and talk to me. Of course, you're surprised I would, number one, hand over my credit card, and secondly, I was willing to take the risk of staking $5,000 of claims simply to hear the rest of the story. But he had intrigued me enough, and this is the way it worked out, and we established a relationship obviously based on trust, and a few weeks after that, we signed an option deal to earn an 80% interest in that property. So why are we and other people so interested in low sulfidation epithermal systems? Well, it's because of this. It's because of the bonanza grades of gold and silver often associated with these deposits. This is an example from Hishikari in Japan, running about 950 grams gold and 3,700 grams per ton silver. And these types of grades are quite common in these low sulfidation systems, and that's why people are so interested in them. So the Shot Rock property now covers about 300 square kilometers in one main claim group and 4 satellite bodies. The red dots you see on that map are the historic gold anomalies and stream sediment samples the prospector was following up. And so we knew we had to, again, implement a model-driven approach to explore such a large project with next to no data and no knowledge of epithermal systems in Nova Scotia. So we started again with a regional stream sediment sampling program, quickly started defining areas of gold anomalies, as you can see by the yellow dots, which are Northern Shield samples from last year. In particular, in the core of that area, you see two very strong clusters of anomalies with up to 1,000 ppb gold in stream sediment samples. So this, very quickly caught our attention, and that's now what we call the highway zone. But you can see most of those dots, both from historic and our own work, sort of follow along that east-west black dashed line, which is a major fault cutting through the system. So we quickly followed up prospecting as all this was happening very quickly late last year. Once we started getting those stream sediment sample results, we quickly started prospecting in the stream where the samples were taken and came up with these very classic epithermal textured rocks. We see these, what was called cauliform banding, crustiform banding, chalcedony, bladed calcite. These are all classic indications of a low sulfidation system. So these are all angular boulders. At first, we knew they were very local because there's so many of them about. And literally just before the first snow fell last fall in Nova Scotia, we finally started to find outcrop of these banded quartz veins, large banded quartz veins, at that time up to 1/2 meter wide. This photo was actually taken last week. We've now found several other quartz veins, now up to about 1.5 meters, 2 meters in width, and zones of very intense stockwork. So this was the first time that a gold-bearing, low sulfidation epithermal system had been found in the province of Nova Scotia. It's not just important, especially in early stage stories, to just simply look at the gold and silver assays, but to also understand the other characteristics of the rocks. And large mineral deposits, whether you're talking about nickel, copper, PGEs, or epithermal gold, large mineral deposits and rich deposits are grown. They do not form instantaneously, they're grown. In order to grow a deposit, you basically need a long-lived and very active system. And we see that with abundance in the textures at Shot Rock, that it's not just the epithermal veining that we're looking at, but all the characteristics of a very long-lived and active system. So to just give a compilation of where we are right now at Shot Rock, the discovery zone is the red squares on the right-hand side of that map, measuring about 2,000 meters by 900 meters, so a fairly substantial footprint on its own. All those samples analyzed between 25 ppb gold and 3.3 gram per ton. More recently, we now have our field crew in the field right now, and they keep on expanding. They're pushing their way west along that structure. We have about 300 samples pending from that second yellow loop on the left, but clearly we're seeing abundant epithermal banded quartz vein along that trend. So this footprint now measures about 4 or 5 kilometers long, and perhaps expanding on the order of 1 to 2 kilometers in a north-south direction. So a very substantial footprint. And I say all the samples we're picking up from these banded quartz veins are very anomalous in gold, anywhere from 0.3 to 3.3 grams per ton. I say access is pretty good. You can see the Trans-Canada Highway on the bottom of the image, only about 300 meters away from some of the quartz veining. We got a railway on the north side, and we actually have a power line running right through that portion of the property. So infrastructure is very readily at hand. So as I said, most of the samples are running 0.3 down to 25 ppb gold. That may not sound very exciting, but when it comes to epithermal systems, you really must understand the geometry and the zonations of the model. And in epithermal systems, we have this level we call the boiling cap. I'm not going to get into technical detail of what that is, but basically above that boiling cap, you do not expect to see very much gold in your quartz veins. You'll see the quartz veins, but not the gold. You go below that level of the boiling cap, and that's where you can come across these bonanza grades of gold very, very quickly. There's a famous picture of a geologist standing on top of one of these systems in Nevada, and these systems are very well known in Nevada, standing on top of one of the fault zones on a hill that's only running 25 ppb gold, yet you can literally hear the machinery mining 3 ounces per ton 100 meters down. So that transition from anomalous gold to bonanza grades can happen extremely quickly. So this is just a Google map image of the Shot Rock discovery, just to exemplify how close it is to the Trans-Canada Highway and how accessible it is. And not only that, it suggests that if this can be found in 2017, 2018, what else, and it's right next to the highway, what else is hiding there in Nova Scotia? But I say these projects, epithermal systems, are highly prized for their ability to contain bonanza grades of gold over good widths. And we found one within earshot of the Trans-Canada Highway in Nova Scotia. And I think the last time a gold deposit was found this close to the highway, it was called Hemlo or something like that. And I'll leave you to draw any analogy. Moving on to our latest acquisition, we just last night announced that we acquired what we call the root and cellar property in the Burden Peninsula of southern Newfoundland. The Burden Peninsula is the same geology that the Shot Rock property in Nova Scotia sits on, just across the straits there in southern Newfoundland. And as a summary of what we have there, this property, again, now Northern Shields is earning 100% option of the root and cellar prospect. All these, out of the 6 occurrences within the root and cellar property, only one has ever seen exploration by a junior mining company. That was the Braxton Bradley showing in the north that had 4 or 5 drill holes in the 90s. Everything else has been found by a prospector since then, and has not been touched by drilling and in any other methodical exploration by a junior mining company. It's simply the prospector that has gone in there with hammer, shovel, broom, swept off the outcrops, washed them down with water, and yet he's come up with zones. You can see in the drop zones, for example, 45 gram per ton gold, 1,300 grams silver. In the middle of that, you have the Conquest Zone, also with plus 40 gram gold content. And so the trend there of this epithermal system is running 5 kilometers and only been touched by a prospector, no methodical exploration. On top of that, you can see the green squares represent an actual copper showing. We're not really sure how this links in with the gold, but it seems to be porphyry-related. Epithermal systems and porphyries, are somewhat related, that they form at different depths. But the focus is the gold, but there's some spectacular copper numbers there as well. And I say they also make better photographs. The focus is the gold, but you can see some of these photographs. There's some pretty spectacular copper mineralization sitting around. I think the top sample is running about 10% copper from the Creston North showing, and again, 8.9% from some of those samples at the bottom. So it's just amazing that this type of property has been sitting around for the last few years. This prospectors have been looking for an option deal, and we just had the right chemistry. He's certainly done a lot of hard work by unearthing these things in the past. And I'd say it's if he can find these with boot and hammer prospecting, we like what we can do with geophysics, drilling, and even mechanical stripping. So just moving on near the end here, I say because we come from a nickel background, we put together an experienced and advisory consultant team to help guide us through the advancement of these gold projects, including, we got on retainer now, the former chief geochemist and chief geologist from Barrick, who's very excited by these projects. We have intensive sampling and mapping at Shot Rock underway right now, and that's going to lead to a drill program at the end of the summer, either August or September. And of course, we're going to be starting exploring on the root and cellar project absolutely as soon as we can, likely in mid-June, and probably trenching will be a large part of that, because we believe we can expand very quickly on those results he has. And then just as a sort of putting it into a regional context, a lot of there's a very underexplored belt of rocks that really run from the Carolinas, where Oceana has the Hale deposit. You're now looking at a number of these epithermal systems in Nova Scotia and Newfoundland, including Sokomon Resources, Bonavista, a private company, and then even Dalradian in Ireland. Dalradian is not an epithermal deposit, but this is a belt of rocks that we feel is vastly underexplored. And funnily enough, there's actually a lot of Australian companies that are involved, both on the North American seaboard, and they're also on the other side in Scotland. And it seems it's been a little bit off the radar screens for Canadian junior mining companies, but we very much like this space as a developing exploration play. So I will be out in my breakout room shortly, so if you have any more questions, I'll be happy to answer them then. Thanks very much.